Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and I wish her all the best in her new role, especially her promise to scrutinise this budget very, very closely. And I join with her in noting that this is a very historic day, the first budget that's been presented by a female Chancellor. And I want to congratulate the Chancellor, and I'm sure she's blazing the trail for women and girls who are watching our proceedings today. Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no doubt about the enormous task that was facing the Chancellor today. After years of chaos and decline under the Conservatives, their appalling economic legacy, set out so clearly in the figures today, is being felt by people across the United Kingdom. So people were looking to this budget for a clean break with those failures of the last few years, for a sense of hope, urgency, and the promise of a fair deal. But I fear the budget won't deliver all that. The Conservatives left behind an enormous mess in our NHS, but I'm afraid it won't be fixed unless the government fixes social care too. The cost of living crisis won't be solved by hitting families, pensioners, family farms and struggling small businesses. And our economy won't grow strongly again unless we repair our broken relationship with Europe. So Liberal Democrats will continue to stand up for our constituents and press the government to be far bolder and act much faster on people's priorities. But having said that, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me also recognise there were some good things in the budget. Indeed, I would want to welcome the Chancellor's decision to move away from the Conservatives' broken fiscal rules, to allow capital investment that our country so desperately needs. I was genuinely surprised, actually, that there was no recognition from the Leader of the Opposition of the difference between capital and current spending, which is the heart of this change. I'd like to welcome the promise of full compensation for the victims of the contaminated blood scandal and the Horizon scandal, and hope that that can be delivered quickly. And I want to welcome the extra investment in our NHS. Fixing the crisis in our NHS is literally a matter of life and death. And it's also essential for growing our economy by getting people off waiting lists, fit and healthy and back into work. The Conservative Party left a health service on its knees, and we on these benches have consistently argued for more investment across the NHS. In hospital buildings, extra GPs, cancer nurses, new radiotherapy machines and much more. So I'm glad the government and the Chancellor has been listening. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, people have heard bold promises of extra GPs and new hospitals before. The Conservative Party made similar promises on the NHS and then broke them. So what we need now is a guarantee that this government will deliver. So I can assure the Chancellor, Liberal Democrats will hold the government to account on its NHS plans. And I hope the budget document sets out in full the answers to some obvious questions. When will the funding be in place for desperately needed hospital projects? And when will those projects be completed? When will the government be able to guarantee that people can see a GP or an NHS dentist when they need one? When will all cancer patients be able to start treatment within the 62-day target and not have to wait for months? When will people know once more that when they call an ambulance, it will be there within minutes, not hours? And Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said before, above all, I worry that despite the welcome extra investment announced today, the government will not be able to fix the NHS because it is ignoring the elephant in the NHS waiting room, the crisis in social care. We all know how bad it is. Hundreds of thousands of people waiting for care, many stranded in hospital beds because the care isn't in place for them to leave hospital. That's bad for them, it's bad for their loved ones, and bad for the NHS. I'm afraid today's announcement on social care just won't touch the sides. It's only a standstill in a crisis. So unless we finally tackle this problem, unless we finally agree a long-term solution for social care, we will never end the crisis in our health service either. So I urge the government once again, please start cross-party talks on care without further delay. And take action now. Any solution must involve paying care workers properly to fill the 130,000 care worker vacancies so elderly and disabled people can get the care they need. The government's plan for a fair pay agreement is a step in the right direction, but it's nowhere near enough. So will the Chancellor look at our plans for a special higher minimum wage for carers? And we mustn't forget the vital role of unpaid family carers. They're heroes, keeping the entire system afloat. So I strongly welcome the Chancellor's decision to raise the earnings limit for carers' allowance. It's a good first step. But as she knows and accepted in her speech, on its own, it will not end the repayment scandal or fix the system. So can the Chancellor confirm whether the earnings limit will now be pegged in the future to at least 16 hours a week at the minimum wage? And while I'm glad that the review, as she described it, will look again at getting rid of the cliff edge for carers' allowance and the earnings limit altogether, I hope she and her colleagues will look at a broader review to give family carers the support they deserve. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives' cost of living crisis has hit family carers particularly hard, but they are not alone. Practically no one has been left untouched by rising bills, higher mortgage payments and soaring food prices. And our small businesses and self-employed have experienced a crisis of their own, dealing first with the pandemic and then with a spike in energy prices and other input costs. The Conservatives only added to that pain, hitting struggling families with stealth tax rises, betraying pensioners when they broke the triple lock, and raising national insurance for our small businesses. So I do welcome, when it comes to the cost of living, the increase in the national minimum wage, although I would urge the Chancellor to extend that higher wage to apprentices as well. But it is very concerning to see the Chancellor repeat a number of the Conservatives' mistakes today. Raising employers' national insurance is a tax on jobs and on people. The OBR report published today shows the budget will reduce real household incomes. And it will it will make the health and care crisis worse by hitting thousands of small care providers. Hitting family homes with inheritance tax changes isn't going to help. And cutting winter fuel payments will leave millions of vulnerable pensioners worried sick this winter. Instead of taking up Liberal Democrat proposals to raise the money we need, by reversing Conservative tax cuts for the big banks or asking the social media giants to pay a bit more, the Chancellor has chosen unfair tax hikes that will hurt small businesses and medium-sized businesses, the engines of our economy. They've already paid too high a price for the Conservatives' economic failures. Forcing them to pay even more simply isn't right. Another Conservative mess that I fear this budget will not begin to clean up is the crisis in local council funding. Year after year, we saw the last government slash funding while asking councils to do more and more. The result has been nothing short of a disaster. Spiralling social care costs are a huge part of this, and that's yet another reason why reform is so vital. But there's another black hole in council budgets, and that's due to the broken system for special educational needs. An extra £1 billion announced by the Chancellor is therefore welcome. And I pay tribute to my colleagues who have campaigned so hard on this, not least my honourable friend, the member for Twickenham. But I feel the crisis in SEND budgets that's been left by the Conservatives is much bigger than that. Last week, the National Audit Office laid bare the sheer scale of the problem, with half of children waiting more than the 20-week limit for an education, health and care plan, and 43% of councils at risk of bankruptcy. The severity of the crisis left by the Conservatives speaks for itself, and so we need to act with even greater urgency to tackle it. So we will be pressing the government to give this House a clear timeline for reform, because neither children, parents or councils can wait any longer. Madam Speaker, the Chancellor has said her main objective is economic growth, and she's right on that. We all agree that we need to get our economy growing strongly again so we can create the jobs and the opportunities for everyone and raise the money that our public services need. And we need a real plan to do that, not just to stop things getting worse or just return to business as usual, but to build the economy of the future. An economy that is genuinely innovative, prosperous and fair. Part of that is fixing the health and care crisis. That will be crucial. So we're managing the public finances responsibly and giving businesses the certainty and stability they need to invest in our economy. And so we're investing in cheap, clean, renewable power to drive a strong recovery, bring down energy bills and create secure, well-paid jobs. And I welcome the steps the government has taken on this so far. But we must also back small businesses much more. They are the beating heart of our local economies. So I'd urge the Chancellor to go further than today's announcement on business rates and to make a historic change by overhauling the broken business rate system that's destroying our high streets and town centres. Tinkering around the edges simply won't be good enough any longer. And finally, Madam Speaker, one more crucial ingredient for growth, fixing our broken relationship with Europe. Removing the Conservatives' trade barriers would be a massive boost for British jobs, British business and the British economy. But by ruling out important steps like a youth mobility scheme or key long-term goals like membership of the single market, the government is trying to grow our economy with one arm tied behind its back. So, Madam Speaker, in July, the British people kicked out of office one of the most damaging governments in our country's history. On the Conservatives' watch, we saw living standards fall, the economy stagnate, and public services decline. And no government would have an easy time turning that around. But people were looking to this budget for hope and a genuinely new direction, for urgent action to fix health and care crisis, for a break with the last government's mistakes on tax, for a plan to grow our economy and rescue local councils on the brink, for a fair deal. Yes, there were big and difficult decisions for the Chancellor to make, but I fear she has got too many of them wrong. We needed a different budget to repair the damage done to our country and to give people the fair deal they deserve. For our constituents, these benches will push the government to do far more for our economy, NHS and care. They are what Liberal Democrats will always champion.